Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you, Rawan, for that wonderful session and the things that you explained about acceptance. So building on that, we as human beings, we are predisposed to wanting states of comfort and states where we can feel we are in control. But life is not about always being in control, neither is it all about being in a comfortable state. Life has a dualistic mechanism working within it, a dualistic dynamism. With health comes sickness, with wealth comes poverty, with comfort comes discomfort, with control comes the lack of control. And that is the nature of our existence. As I've heard the past masters say, that night is accompanied by day, and they constitute a one whole. You can't distinguish one from the other. And similarly, good comes with what we call evil, and what is compatible with our souls comes with that which is incompatible. But our inner want is to ward off the situation that we find uncomfortable and move towards a state of comfort. Now, in that is our misery, because there's a lot of hesitation and there's a lot of reluctance in accepting what we find inconsistent and incompatible with our inner want and our inner state. But if you were to look at the great people like Imam Hussein, you find him in a state of bliss at the peak of his tribulations. Now, why does he find that bliss? Possibly because finally the soul has given in to the fact that the worldly comforts and the worldly discomforts are nothing to do with him. He is moving through these as a soul who has been indoctrinated into thinking that these are his states. But finally, he purges himself and arrives at that status of what he really is, as a beautiful spirit who is experiencing these wonderful states emerge and pass by him, and he is coming through these experiences to the fullness of his own self. The best way to look at life is to see it as a collection of experiences where we are going through things with which we are not identified. We are only here momentarily, and we are here to experience things. It would be quite defeating to say that I will only taste sweet substances but not taste sour substances, because the meaning of sweetness of a sweet substance can only be appreciated if we taste something that is contrary to it. Similarly, the meaning of health is null and void unless we know what it means to be unhealthy, for example. The meaning of being in a state of wealth means nothing, and comfort, unless we know what poverty means. Similarly, anxiety and inner mental bliss, these are states that actually mean nothing of themselves unless they are contrasted. So if we can arrive at this understanding that life is a collection of experiences that we have to experience, and that is what the life of the world has to uniquely offer to us, then our attitudes towards what we call difficulty, grief, tribulation, worry, and situations that cause anxiety will change radically. We will say, this is an experience that I am to experience momentarily. It is not me. It is not permanent. What is really hindering this mindset is the negative way in which we are taught religion. In religion, we are taught that if you want a state of comfort, then you have to belong to God, and God can dispel all evil and bring good to you. So what that does is it forces us into the worship of God, who is somehow going to dispel all evils and bring good for us. Whereas God has engineered this world in a way that we should experience good, what we call good, and what we call evil. And in that way, religion then becomes defeating because it prevents us from wholesomely accepting what we are supposed to accept. So think about it this way: when we are ill, we pray to God to remove our illness, which is a good thing. But together with that, inside our minds, there is lack of acceptance for that state. We are pushing that state away and we are constantly struggling in. There is a struggle and disrest within the soul. However, if we could understand the whole meaning of calling on to God at this point is a positive one, to say, oh God, I am in a very uncomfortable state. I call on to you to remove it. However, I know that it is from you, and therefore it cannot be evil. So allow me to accept it nonetheless whilst I am experiencing it. Allow me to embrace it as opposed to struggling with it internally. What that does is it removes the anxiety from the mind. It frees the mind. And as the mind is freed, we will find that that difficulty actually has come to deepen our connection with ourselves and with God. Whereas this constant state of resistance does not allow for that experience to fully be absorbed by the soul. Now, what happens as a result is that that experience is sent back to us. So we re experience it. But every time we interact with it in the same way, we call on to God to remove it, and we are unaccepting of that experience, and we are filled with inner form of distress that does not allow us to wholesomely embrace whatever that experience has to offer to us. In this way, of course, we also get a lot of complexities in our minds. Why doesn't God respond? But God is saying, I actually have sent that experience to you. You are leaving it to me. I have decided to let it continue. Now you should understand that there is some good in there for you. Recognize it, understand it. The Quran does say, Inna ma'al usri yusra, with difficulty is ease. And our interpretation of this is that every difficulty will be removed by God and state of ease will be brought. No, that is only one interpretation. That ease and difficulties accompany each other like night and day. They are never separated from each other. But the deeper meaning is that in difficulties is inner ease, if we can embrace it. That inner struggle goes, that hesitation, that reluctance, that state of begrudging it, it goes. Now, if we can clearly understand that this world is momentary, as we say, we the faithful acknowledge that it's a momentary world, and we are going to quickly go away from here, then in that case, it would be very unwise of us to not embrace the decree of God as and how it is. As I said, we call on to Allah in difficulties to deepen our connection with God, but not call on to Allah to remove our difficulties, and that becomes the purpose of God. That is very wrong. When the Quran says, Ud'uni astajib lakum, call me and I will respond to you, the response doesn't mean that I will remove the difficulties. Response means that you will find me with you, accompanying you. And how wonderful Imam Hussein actually expresses this sentiment at the martyrdom of Hazrat Asghar Salamullah. He said, Oh Allah, what makes it bearable is the knowledge that you witnessed the scene with me and you preserve every soul with what they have earned. So Imam Hussein called on to God, but he was the one person who was not responded to by God by our estimation. God did not respond to Imam Hussein at all on the day of Ashura, if that is what response means in the naive way that we have understood. But in the very lofty, intimate way, God was responding to Imam Hussein in the sense that amidst those difficulties, Imam Hussein's soul came in a state of acceptance. It became fluid and it got the fullness of the light of God destined for him, which he could not have received otherwise, to the extent that when he is going in a state of utmost peace, calm, and serenity. So here it is. Life is a struggle, but this struggle needs to wear off as we progress through life. It needs to become an external struggle of the body and the mind to rectify situation and to bring it to an optimal state. But the inner struggle needs to leave our heart. I have a bad job, a bad boss. Well, instead of resenting it, instead of struggling with it, just say to yourself, can I change my job? Yes, change it. Can I? If the answer is no, then fine, you're stuck with this. Now do it willingly, do it with acceptance. Understand that God has certain goods in there for you to receive. Maybe your ego needs to be crushed to an extent by you being subservient to a very nasty person. Maybe you need to become a bigger person to say, look, you can swear, curse, do whatever you want to me. It doesn't affect me internally. I have a bad partner. Yeah, so what? You have chosen that partner. God has chosen that partner for you. Make the most of it. He is very, very difficult. Well, if he is difficult, then it is an opportunity for you to internally grow by saying that not only am I unfazed by his difficult behavior, but I can also help him rectify his own self. Can you move away from him? Yes. And if you can't bear it, then move away. But that inner state of struggle, hesitation, unwillingness to accept the situation, that needs to go, because that is a fool's universe. It is not the real universe. The real universe is one filled with difficulties, and these difficulties are there for a purpose. Now, before I finish, I need to remind ourselves of a few things that we, the faithful community, do acknowledge. We acknowledge that God is most merciful. He is the best of planners. He is needless. He does not want to see us suffer. Given all these beliefs and knowledge that we have, then after that, if we face difficulty, then we should know that there has to be some beneficial purpose for that difficulty. Additionally, when we look at God and the notion of God carefully, we will see that actually the struggles of this world are not particularly designed by God to see how well we do. It is actually a case of us wanting an opportunity to arrive at the fullness of our own godly divine light. Now, if that is the understanding at the back of our minds, then in that case, we can make most of this life of ours. So, as opposed to doing so many prayers and mannats and taswees, which should be done for the love of God, by the way, but as opposed to doing them in order to remove our tribulation, we should just say to Allah, like Abraham, well, Lord, you know what my state is. I leave it in your hands. We need to be open, very transparent with God. So, well, I'm not at the level of Abraham. I can't say to you so easily, you know my struggles. I leave it in your hands. Do what you want. Oh Lord, I find it difficult. Please remove it. And if you don't want to remove it, then bless me with the inner strength to bear it. Or whatever goods you have for me to procure from this experience, well, make it known to me so that I know that there is this benefit for me in this what seems to be harm and difficulty. So be open with God, be very, very transparent with God, and move on with life genuinely. You see, failure to do so, we get stuck in life at some point somewhere. The bodies grow old, the opportunity diminishes, and at the end of the day, when we die, we see that we have lost years and years of opportunity because we got stuck at some point somewhere, or in some attitude, or we could not bear some form of difficulty or challenge. So I'll stop there. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.